Good evening. Nice to see everybody again. My name is Ann Pedeswa. I'm with TBG Partners, and tonight I have with me my colleague Mark Meyer, Jonathan Dunbar, and Dandy Zhang. We also have other team members who've helped us out in this project. And then virtually, we have our colleagues at Architexas. And so we have Craig Meldy, as well as Ann Stimmel, who will also be joining us. So we've had a great opportunity to meet with and get to know your community a little bit better through this process, and also have a chance to get to know you as well as we explored the opportunities for the Commons at Agora and creating this place from space. A little bit of a recap. One of the things that we did early on was we met with members of your City Hall community, went out, looked at some site visits throughout North Texas to try to understand what other cities are doing to create opportunities for economic generation, as well as opportunities to bring communities together and attract future citizens. And so that's a little map of where we've gone. And we also had a chance to look at a number of different desirable elements that we witnessed, including connections to commerce and nature, interactive water features, and kind of an iconic district or connections between shopping as well as a park space. So one of the things that's really important to note that's unique to Corinth is this wonderful stand of post oaks that you have that really creates this concept of longevity for this particular community that you'll see we'll incorporate a little bit further. Also within this process, as we reached out to the community, unfortunately through the storm and COVID, we weren't able to get together with people personally, but we did a fairly robust survey and had a chance to get a little bit of feedback from over 375 plus constituents to try to understand what they think of the community in Corinth, that they believe Corinth is quiet, it's a family place, they want to have a number of different activities and activities that they do in the area, which includes going to parks, walking, movies, and a number of different elements that they would love to have a little bit closer to home. And we believe that the Commons at Agora would allow the city to provide that to their community and would be certainly a conduit for community building. And with that, we asked the citizens, what kind of activities would you like to see, or do you feel reflects the community of Corinth? And they suggested farmers markets, food trucks, concert areas, places for dining, places for families to gather, and restaurants. So they want this combination of open gathering space as well as kind of restaurant spaces and more kind of activated or program spaces. And with that, trying to understand what businesses might benefit from adjacencies or within the park that would also benefit the community in terms of not only activities, but also future revenue for the city and job opportunities. So coffee shops, shopping, different levels of shopping, a farmer's market, one was, some of the comments were very specific to Trader Joe's, a bakery, an ice cream shop, lots of different activities that people can get their day-to-day, errands run and gather with their friends without necessarily having to get on the highway. And trying to understand what their favorite activities are by importance. So certainly these family gathering or community gathering opportunities such as farmers markets and arts fairs, festivals, also understanding, having the opportunity to picnic with family, outdoor dining, social events. These are opportunities not only that your community is looking for, but that exists elsewhere in North Texas. In particular, were evident in the cities that we viewed when we went and did our survey. And so in understanding that, we wanted to say, where do you guys go? Where do you go for leisure and to gather? So Denton Square was one that was very, that was popular, as well as just a number of different places that include both business as well as leisure. So going back to one of the tenets we said early on in this process is we like to focus on the economic, social, and environmental well-being of the community to build future opportunities for, for the community as a whole. And further on, what elements within the park or in the adjacencies are important to you. One thing that we were pretty delighted to see was this emphasis on people do recognize that those trees are important and they're quite beautiful. That open space right now really is complemented with those trees. Having an event space, a place of gathering that also provides a flexible opportunity for the community. Public restrooms, a very basic need, and also this concept of looking to complementing the trees in a woodland. Shade structure is important, as well as looking out for our smallest members of the community and having a playground and such. So you can see that there's a number of different design elements that were very desirable for your community. So what does this mean? So trying to understand the guiding principles of place for the city of Corinth is a place for gathering, recreation, and commerce, a celebration of the natural features such as that creek bed, as well as the trees, and a reference to classical forms that speaks certainly to the name of the city itself. So these are a number of different images that seem to stick out with the community, included kind of seat walls, art, a splash pad, plantings, and a playground and place for gathering. And then we have this concept of guiding principles of architecture. So really understanding community identity through classical modernism and architecture and design elements. In our last presentation, we had architects to speak to this a little bit more specifically, and they will have a chance to talk a little bit further in the program. But really trying to listen to your community, to understand the name, the city of Corinth, to understand the concept of agora, and complementing that with a park or a space, including of those adjacencies, some of the buildings adjacent to the park, that really reinforces this concept of this classical modernism was very, very important to your community. So during our last discussion, we came up with two concepts, this concept of assembly and this concept of peace. And what we had, or we're given the opportunity to do, is to kind of review these different design elements or plans within these concepts and try to ascertain what spoke to the city of Corinth and its citizens. So some of the things, for example, in assembly that were important were the concept of a water feature, a pedestrian connection across Agora Way that would create kind of a north-south connection that would go between the future development for pedestrians coming from the north side. I'm kind of working counterclockwise. Also having some sort of smaller event space to the east was something that was quite interesting, almost like an extension of the park, kind of a connection between the railway and the park itself, and then into the nature. A shaded play area, so utilizing the shade trees that exist and possibly complementing them with more. An entry monument, so as people make their way to the city of Corinth or to this parkway or to City Hall, and they're coming off I-35 from the west, they're going to have a monument that will identify that this is something special. It's a community space. But so too, as you make that arc from the east to west, you'll have an eye shot of that particular monument as well. Having a large event lawn space that can be used for many different activities. This concept of terrace seating, so providing a terrace seating area that people could either use as a seat wall or use a small lawn area to throw a blanket down and have a small picnic with children or whomever. And also this importance of having a visual connection from City Hall, certainly as you look at the mezzanine level of this building and you look across the park, really reinforcing that connection. So no matter where you are, whether you're within City Hall or you're in the park, you know that this is a civic place. In the peace concept, we also talked about entry monuments. One of the things that came out that there's not just one entry to this park. In essence, each corner offers a great opportunity to invite people in. So looking at a possible entry monument or entry area, connecting the rail into the park along Agora Way, this long alleyway or linear plaza across Agora Way to kind of activate that space. And also having a civic multi-use facility, maybe a restaurant or a coffee shop within the park that would have outdoor seating. Also this access to nature, whether it's nature trails or some sort of boardwalk. Creating some sort of buffer to Corinth Parkway, just so people feel comfortable when they're in the space. And so to have this east-west pedestrian connection. There was a citizen who was here who talked about they spend a lot of time at the soccer fields, very much engaged. How can they make their way into this space safely with their children along the pedestrian pathways? And then again, one of the things that is also important is this concept of a pavilion, having some sort of entertainment pavilion where there can be concerts or plays or what have you for your community. So these were some of the big ticket items in terms of these items that the community spoke to that they felt were very important. And so as we move forward, Mark is going to join me up here, and he's going to talk a little bit about some of these concepts, kind of what we call a program diagram, so you can understand where in general these places might go, and then we'll get into the design a little bit more specifically. So Mark, I'll let you come up.
Good evening, everybody. Mark Meyer with TBG. I'm happy to be here tonight. Over the last month, we spent a lot of time and passion really digging into this concept on what we heard from you guys when we were here last. So what you're going to see tonight, we're going to start out first with diagrams like we did last time and sort of walk you guys through the program elements. We're going to talk about architecture, what it looks like and what it feels like. And we're also going to get very detailed in the master plan. So what we've done over the last 4 weeks is not only have we talked about park program, but we've also almost technically designed the master plan for the commons at the Agora. And we'll start big picture, and then we'll dial down into every little space that we feel is important. And Jonathan Dunbar with our office will walk you guys through that tonight. So just starting off with this slide right here, I wanted to start off here with the image up on the left-hand corner. I think one of the things for us is really trying not only have you guys and the residents and the town of Corinth inspire us, but also how does history inspire us? Your name, Corinth, the idea of the Agora and the historical ideas that come from there is how can we lay that all into the master plan? Also, the idea of Corinth is a very family-oriented city, and how does this master plan create a very casual area to where people feel very comfortable to where they want to gather? It doesn't feel stuffy, it doesn't feel contrived, it feels like you guys are. And then the other one is really the idea of creating a grand lawn and some effects of how can we use space and use geometry and trees and architecture to make those spaces feel comfortable. So just starting out, some of the connections that we want to talk about in this right here are two. What you'll see tonight in the plans is we're concentrating on two large moves. One is the visual connection that this space is going to have back to City Hall, and also the physical connection as it goes across Corinth Parkway. The other one is Agora Way, and how the top part of the park is activated through Agora Way, activates the mixed-use development on the other side, but also makes a very strong connection to the future DCTA rail station. And I think hopefully through that, you'll sort of see those ideas as they evolve. In this plan right here, this is really just a little bit about park circulation. After this, we're going to get into park programming. One of the things that we try to do, this really shows all the dashed lines that are the internal or the external pedestrian circulation for the park. So what this really tells us is we are trying to make this area a highly walkable place to get to, but also when you're inside of it to create a very highly walkable space. The internal circulation are the dashed purple lines that go around the park. And then also we have a large boardwalk. Let me see if I can move this guy just a little bit so you guys can see the legend. There we go. And we also have the boardwalk that cuts through the trees. What that does, that creates a secondary loop within the park. So you have multiple points of access and circulation through and around the park. So we're going to start on the east side, and we're going to sort of work through these colored diagrams. On the east side here, the one thing that is driving this park is having a large flexible event lawn in the middle right here. That's the area in the middle that's in green. That's about 21,000 square feet. That roughly sits about 2,000 people comfortably for a concert if you had a concert that large. And that's people having about a 3 foot by 3 foot space around them. So you could pack in a lot more if you wanted to. With that, what's terminating up in the corner where Agora and Main Street is the main pavilion. I know last time we talked to you guys, there was a lot of concern to make sure that noise was going away from the residential communities and also providing a backdrop for people that sun was not in their eyes during the daytime or the late evening when a festival was going on, a music concert. So that pavilion is there at the corner of Agora Way and Main Street. And as we get into these concepts, we're going to detail out what that pavilion looks like and what is the plaza that is surrounding that area right there. The main traffic circulation that goes around this area on Main Street and Agora Way, we have the main street, we have parking. So in this area right here, we have 52 parking spaces that are in purple. The area where you're going into Main Street is angled head-in parking, and the area that's along Agora Way, because we felt that's a much more walkable street, is actually a sliver of parallel parking. So that makes traffic slow down much more going through that area. It feels and looks more urban within that piece right there. Along with that, we also have a water feature. If you remember in the last plan that we talked to you guys with, the preferred location of the water feature was actually at the very corner of Agora Way and Main Street. We've actually moved that into the center of the park, not the center of the park, but the center of Agora Way on where the street goes through there, and then push that about 50 feet into the park to be away from traffic. We've also looked at dedicating outdoor seating on the north side of that area. So as parents, you can observe and watch children. They're focused into the lawn instead of back towards the main curb within that area. On the backside of just this west area right here, we have the main boardwalk that loops through the existing cedar trees and post oak trees and makes a connection down to the plaza coming from City Hall in that area right there. On the west side of the development, one of the things that we've done, and we heard this last time, is that we need to make sure that there's a restroom within this area, and we also like the idea potentially of retail or restaurant that can help activate Agora Way. So we've taken some nods from Greek terminology. A restroom used to be called a bathhouse. It's not a bathhouse, it's a restroom, but we like that idea of the Agora playing sort of the unique way that history did when a real Agora was created. Also, the idea of a stoa. A stoa in Greek terms was a retail or restaurant building that helped activate the space that's around it. So our stoa, which is our retail restaurant building, is lined on Agora Way. There's about 20 to 25 feet between them and the street that would be double lined with trees to make a very nice sort of arcade and pedestrian walkway that goes down that area. We wanted to give enough room for these buildings away from the street to make sure that they were very pedestrian oriented. Behind the stoa and the bathhouse, there are two yellow areas that are outdoor seating. These are outdoor patio seating. They are surrounding the play area that is sort of in a gold color right here. That play area is tucked into the trees. We've done that from a couple reasons. One, it gets that away from the street as far as possible. It also gets kids and parents into a natural environment here, and we thought that was important within that, and the idea of keeping them a little bit longer to play instead of just looking at it and running off somewhere. We feel there's a lot more creativity that can go to that. The future DCTA rail station, we've concentrated an enhanced walkway and plaza to get over there if it's there one day at the corner of North Corinth Street and Agora Parkway. And then again on Agora Parkway right here, we've put parallel parking and then one row of angled head-in parking on Corinth Street, which is about 34 spaces through that area. So altogether, if we look at sort of the park programming that's in here, this overlays everything on top of it. We thought it'd be a little bit easier to break it out, to talk about one side to the next side on there. As you can see, there are a lot of park programs here. That's one thing that we're excited about. The more things that you can do in the park, the more successful and the active your park is going to be. It needs to feel like there's life there and there's people there. The activities that are happening between the pavilion, the bathhouse, the stoa, the playground, the lawn, small little areas of arts and entry plazas we feel could be very successful from the programming standpoint. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Craig Meldy. Craig is going to talk a little bit about the history of the Agora and what it means to the placement of our buildings. And then after that, Jonathan Dunbar is going to take over, and he's going to do a deep dive into the master plan for you guys. Craig, it's all
Yeah,
yours.
great, thank you. Yeah, these are some of the early sketches that we began producing. Our design approach for the architecture of the structures and actually the placement of the structures within the park landscape really follows classical architectural principles. Again, reflecting, I think, what the community it desires to have that respect for the name Corinth and ancient Greek history. But to do this in a more contemporary expression, that brings it up to sort of modern standards. I think that what this is going to do is really create a very distinctive place for Corinth, a distinctive place in Texas, that is. What do we mean by respecting classical architectural principles? That's respect of proportion, material, symmetry, and order. So in placing the structures, it's being placed in a lot of ways like ancient agoras evolved. Ancient agoras, again, were enframed public spaces for gathering, public gathering, for commerce, for government. And a lot of times as these agoras in ancient Greece evolved, were a whole lot along civic development and movement patterns, and that responding to the movement patterns of the town. And in a way, we're sort of doing that here as well with the planned Agora Way and Main Street, picking up on that geometry. So as you can see, we're starting to develop elements of architecture and placement of buildings that respond to not only the landscape, but to the planned geometry of the streets and how they confront the spaces within the park. But as you'll see later in the presentation, a more detailed drawings, we are applying these classical architectural and planning principles, but I think in a much more contemporary way, in which we're calling contemporary classicism. Okay.
Thanks, Craig. Good evening. My name is Jonathan Dunbar with TBG. Excited to be here with you and share a little bit more detail about the commons. So what you see before you here is our master plan with a little more detail. And like Mark indicated, I'm just going to give kind of an overview at this plan, and then we're going to kind of do little enlargements and walk through in a little more detail, kind of a couple pieces of the park, just to blow those up a little larger. So if we start kind of in that lower right corner, the southeast corner, straight across from City Hall, again, the big move is to really just open up that connection from a pedestrian and visual standpoint, coming across from that circle number 1 at the corner of Main Street and Corinth Parkway. Really opens up into the big event lawn, a little over 20,000 foot event lawn, and looks back up at number 4, that northeast corner at the pavilion. You can see it kind of activates two sides, really. It activates the lawn side, but we also really wanted to activate that northern side and the street side of Main Street and Agora Way. So it kind of activates the Plaza Street there as well. As we kind of keep moving around, again, kind of down Agora Way, we start to hit where that pedestrian connection comes across Agora Way and cuts across in more of a tabletop condition where we lose the curb, and it's we pick up some bollards and some detail, very pedestrian oriented. As that crosses into the park, that's where we've got the water feature that kind of anchors that end, like Mark was talking about. And that's also kind of on axis if you look back from that water feature all the way back to the southeast to City Hall. So it kind of is that terminus of the two long axes. We kind of keep moving around down Agora Way. Again, we start hitting that bathhouse and that stoa that we talked about. And then that really sets up this great little area with the play area and the smaller lawn. And then, of course, the future rail station to the west there. All of that, again, and framed by the buildings in white, the future buildings, the future mixed use to the north. Those are all shown in white, and then something potential future development to the east side of Main Street. So what we're going to show you next, this is a big long section through the park. So there's a little key map there in the northeast, or in the top right, really shows that red line where that section's cut from. So the very top image of the section, that's the long section, and then the next two in the middle and the bottom, that's it blown up just a little bit. So if we start in that middle section on the very far left side, you see the rail station. We kind of move across North Corinth. We pick up the angled parking. You start to see the Stoa building right there prominently in the middle. A lot of glass and columns. Really starts to set up this great little outdoor seating space with playground and lawn, and the bathhouse kind of to the right side. And you can see how that kind of starts to tuck in against that existing tree preserve, and how it grade starts to fall down a little bit to the very far right. So you start having this low depressed area with these great big trees that exist there today. And that's where that boardwalk starts to kind of cut through there. Then if we keep going to the right, we'll actually pop down to the very bottom section, and that just is an extension. So we pick up from that natural preserve, that low sort of drainage area. We've got the great big post oak trees. That then kind of transitions into our big event lawn. And what you'll notice is from the lawn, we kind of sculpted that to where it kind of basically, we've got sort of a sunken plaza and depressed the pavilion ever so slightly. And that's very intentional because if you kind of remember back to some of the earlier plans we showed you, just our observations of the site, that northeast corner is actually the high point of the site. So when we all decided to locate the pavilion there, it just felt right. We don't really want to look up at the pavilion. We really want to look down at the pavilion. So we've sunken that plaza so that there's a great relationship from the lawn to the pavilion there. You can see that maybe it's up about 3 steps, so it's very accessible from the lawn to the pavilion. So it's not raised real 4 or 5 feet high like a huge stage or anything. It feels very open and accessible on just a kind of a daily basis. And then if you kind of keep moving from the right from the pavilion, you start to see those steps that take you back up, back over to Main Street. So it feels very engaged, that plaza that's over on the right-hand side. And then the very far right, that's where we hit Main Street with the angled parking that Mark talked about. Next, this is basically a bird's eye view. If we were sitting right over top of City Hall, if we were up in a drone or something like that, looking from City Hall across the park, you see a number of things. The very far left-hand side, you see the rail line and a future station there. In the far distance to the top is the future mixed-use development, so a 3-story buildings that really start to frame the park, and you see that pedestrian way that really kind of cuts through there. And then on the right-hand side, the very far right-hand border, that would be Main Street. So Main Street that kind of connects through. You start to see the angled parking and this great alley of trees along Main Street. Perhaps that's where we kind of plug in food trucks. We show a couple in red there that can kind of start activating that side. We can also do the same thing on Agora Way. You start seeing a couple food trucks there to the north of the pavilion. But the big centerpiece is, of course, the big event lawn, framed up by 2 things. One, the big kind of arcing boardwalk that takes you from the intersection of Corinth and Main Street, kind of through that preserve and back around to that terminus where we've got the water feature and that great kind of gathering spot there. You start to see the pavilion in the top right that spills out onto the event lawn. And again, that activates 2 sides, the lawn side and the plaza side. And then on the west side of the plaza, again, is the bathhouse and Stoa buildings that start to set up that the playground and smaller lawn there that tucks in against the trees. So if we were to zoom into that first corner, straight across from City Hall, this is a little enlargement of what happens there. So there's kind of as Ann mentioned, we really want to activate all 4 corners. So it's really there's not one front door to this park, one entry to this park. This is one of many, right? So really want to pick up any kind of pedestrian traffic that's going to be coming down Corinth Parkway, do some great enhancement to the intersection there, really define the crosswalk well for the pedestrian, and then just start to bring those things in those street furniture, street trees, a double row alley, great street lights that really start to play up the pedestrian realm there. You can start to see the angled parking that starts to activate Main Street there. And then with the grade, how it kind of starts stepping down to the lawn. So as you're there, you sort of have this promontory as you look out over the lawn, and the lawn's kind of sunken down. And if we were standing right there at that spot, this is what that would look like. So you're standing there, you see the event lawn that's kind of sunken down. There's a couple terraces, very intentional. That way people can kind of start to activate and sit on that ledge and kind of have a smaller space to gather there. All kinds of street furniture and street life that starts to happen up along Main Street with the parking, and perhaps there, again, that's where we could plug in food trucks and start to activate that side. The pavilion, again, it's on the high point of the site, but ever so slightly we've kind of sunken that in so that it's more of a flatter condition connecting out to the lawn. And in the far distance, you kind of see that pedestrian way between the break and the two buildings that really want to make that strong connection. Zooming over to the pavilion side, a little enlargement there, the corner of Agora and Main Street. Again, it really activates two sides. Again, it's a two-sided piece. It's a pavilion that on a day-to-day basis, you can go out, it's great shade, when it's hot, go out there, have a picnic, and then it sets up a great lawn for any kind of event or just casual day. And then it really activates that northeast corner. So it activates kind of the urban plaza right there on that northeast corner. Then you can also kind of see the transition from the angled parking on Main Street to how we start to treat it on Agora Way with parallel parking, and all the great intersection improvements we would do to really play up the pedestrian crossings and make that feel safe and welcoming there. And here, Ann Stimmel is going to share a little bit of detail on the pavilion architecture. Ann?
Hi, yeah. So my name is Ann Stimmel. I'm a project architect with Architectus, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the individual pieces of architecture. So when we started thinking about the pavilion, as Jonathan was saying, we wanted it to be engaging on both sides. So we looked at how, if there was a performance going on or something going on where the steps are towards the street side, or if it was a large performance going on for the lawn, how could that happen? So we took out center, what you would see traditionally as columns all the way across the pavilion. We took out the center columns on both sides so that could happen. Then we started thinking about materials and how could we make this into that contemporary classicism that we were talking about. And one of the things we started looking at was the actual Capitol. And we think that it would be really beneficial and a strong note for the city if we had the opportunity to design a Corinth Capitol that was truly representational of the city itself, its own Corinth Capitol, Corinthian Capitol. So we started looking at exploding that and doing it in metal forms and bringing in that more of modern materials into something that is typically stone. We thought that the column should still be stone, a cast stone that would represent back to more of the traditional side. And then we started looking at, well, how can we bring the landscaping into the columns? And so what we did was we exploded the column. So you can see in the one photo how we cut the column into 4 pieces and allow ivy to grow up through the column and connect the architecture back to the landscape. We'd want to use a more contemporary roof, like standing metal seam with a zinc. And we started looking at different cedar planks we could use as the decking and the structure underneath. So I think pulling these elements all together, it creates something that is a nod to classical architecture, but it brings it into today's times.
Thanks, Ann. Moving along, just to the next piece of the enlargement. This is the pedestrian way that kind of connects from that mixed-use development to the north, on the north side of Agora Way, across into the park. So, we talked a little bit about that water feature that serves as the terminus of two axes: one from City Hall, and second, as you come down that pedestrian way. And you can kind of start to see how the street treatment of Agora Way starts to be a little different here. You see the detail of the parallel parking to the right and left side, but in the middle, that's where we tabletop. We'll go curbless, pick up bollards. It becomes very tight, so it's a very pedestrian-friendly street. It's not there's going to be different textures and pavements. Cars are going to feel like they're driving kind of like in an auto court, so to speak. So we want to really encourage that flow back and forth across the street in this wide swath for pedestrians. From there, we've got a great little gathering space, like Mark described, for parents to kind of sit on the north side of the water feature there. And then the water feature that kind of starts to activate the lawn. So from there, you can kind of spill right into the lawn. And then in the lower left corner, you start to catch a little glimpse of the bathhouse as well. That'll show up in the next enlargement, but that's also a great kind of architectural focal piece as you look down from the north, kind of back towards the park. And if we kind of keep sliding over to the west just a little bit further, you still see the bathhouse in that northeast corner. And then you start to pick up the big, long Stoa building that really does a great job of anchoring Agora Way and really activating that on the north side. And then the south side, you get this great little sort of triangular space that's framed up by the beautiful detail of the Agora, spills out into this great little patio. Perhaps there's some flagstone or something with tables you can kind of sit out on. And then there's kind of this great space that we see a lot of times when we have play. It's not so much the play that makes it successful, it's the what's adjacent to it. So you kind of see in the lower right the play that kind of tucks up into the existing trees that we talked about, but there's also kind of the gathering space for parents and families, and then the lawn. So you're not confined to just the play area. You can spill into the lawn. That lawn's about 3,000 feet, just for a little bit of scale. So it's a great, comfortable space in this side of the park that you can kind of go and spend a great time in. So here's a little perspective from that corner. This would be if you came across from the rail station and you cross North Corinth, you start to get this view. So on the left side, you've got the Stoa building, really beautiful architecture that starts to frame up this space. You see the lawn kind of unfolding in front of you, little patio there, and then the playground in the back that kind of tucks up against the big trees. It's a great space. It's a little more intimate and comfortable than the big event lawn. So there's a lot of different scales that kind of work around the park. A lot of different offerings. Andy, you want to talk to us a little further about the bathhouse and the Stoa?
Yeah. So again, we knew that having restrooms in the park is really important, especially I know as a parent myself, having that access when you're there with your kids at the playground or the playing at the water feature, you always want that right nearby. So we thought it would be important to make 3 large restrooms. There's family style restrooms that you can easily access, and then have storage and janitor's closet as a part of that. So there's some storage in the park area that can accommodate maintaining some of the things going on in the park, or if there's certain pieces that you put out seasonally that you need to store inside of this room. We wanted to carry that classical contemporary, but with some contemporary materials into the bathhouse as well. So we are proposing using cedar siding around on all surrounding the building, and then repeat those exploded columns so that we could bring in the landscape and the ivy. And it would also have the same style of capital roof and the beams, bringing in some of those natural materials that the community seemed to be fond of. And then last, we want to talk about the STOA building. We wanted this to be a rather open space so that it could be really flexible, whether it is a retail building, a community room, an incubator space for temporary restaurant, like a pop-up restaurant that's only there for a short time. And we wanted it to, again, be that nod to classical architecture, but have a modern feeling to it. So we introduced that the walls that are set back inside, creating that STOA effect, are all glass. So you can see through this building and to the other side. And so it doesn't really interrupt the landscape. It becomes, you know, a part of the surrounding area, and creating that minimalist effect. And then in this building, we again then repeated the same materials so it could tie to the other two buildings, and have more, by not exploding these columns, we have more of a traditional feel, but as offset by that really beautiful glass that surrounds and defines the retail space.
Yeah, so from here, Ann, do you have anything you want to wrap up? Yeah, that's the part. Happy to take questions or any comments, any feedback, anything like that. But